Shalom, and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Faced with the stark reality of long-frozen sanctions about to make a comeback, promising to impact the struggling economy even more than its suffering population has been used to, Iran is attempting to find a diplomatic discourse out of the simmering crisis around its military nuclear ambitions. These Iranians are talking with the European Union and major regional powers, but have yet to find a formula which could satisfy both their insistence on enriching uranium and the American refusal to allow it. So, 3 months after the June war with Israel, what is now the current state of play? Joining us to discuss this matter, including from Washington, or rather from New York City, is Dr. Olli Heinonen, who formerly served as the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency and currently a Distinguished Fellow at Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. It's great to see you, Olli.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure indeed. Also joining us is Mr. Amir Oren, who is TV7's editor-at-large. It's always great to see you as well, Mr. Oren.
Thank you.
So, Amir, let's also put into context right now. This week we have the IAEA Board of Governors meeting, during the course of which the Director General, Rafael Mariano Grossi, came out and stated that there is some type of progress in the dialogue. Of course, this has been quite repetitive over the years, irrespective on whether or not ultimately it did trickle down to reality on the ground, but nonetheless, a sense of optimism?
Well, a very qualified sense of optimism, because otherwise the IAEA can close up shop and go elsewhere, perhaps to the Ukraine or to some nuclear security issues around the world. But obviously, Iran is the major issue now, and Grossi, a seasoned diplomat, a former ambassador, knows that he has, at least publicly, to give his viewers or listeners or the Board of Governors some sense that progress is possible, if not immediately, around the corner. But the IAEA and its problems with Iran is only one half of the issue. The other half, of course, is what happened when the JCPOA was breached, indeed, first by the US under President Trump in the first term, but the other signatories, mostly the E3, did not like the Iranian reaction. The Iranians believed that because they only responded to the American behavior when they breached the agreement on their own, perhaps they will be spared the punishment by the Europeans, the so-called snapback of the sanctions late next month. And now they found out that they were given two blows. The first was the June war, mostly Israeli strikes, but at the end also an American one. And now the European diplomatic offensive. So this is a very delicate time. Efforts are still being made. As far as we know, unless there is some back channel, there are no talks between the Iranians and the Americans. The Iranians wish the Europeans to carry their messages to Washington. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of receptivity on the part of the Trump administration to the various tricks the Iranians may have up their diplomatic sleeves.
I do remember vividly, Mr. Olin, that the Iranians have breached the sanctions early on, following the ratification of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was never signed. Nonetheless, it was adopted under UN Security Council Resolution 2231. And despite violating the terms of the deal on a couple of occasions, the Biden administration at the time decided to turn a blind eye to those violations to give the Iranians a chance. Dr.
No,
Olli,
not during the Trump term. They waited a year between 2018 to 2019 when they reacted in kind. But this is ancient history.
I'm talking, Mr. Olin, about violations prior to the Trump administration, during the Obama years still, which included a number of violations. Dr. Heinonen, I know you have a good memory on those things. I'm not mistaken on this one, right?
You are not, because this all goes to this what we call long outstanding issues. And if you read the IAEA report from December 2015, it actually tells that the IAEA didn't accept as an organization, the Secretariat, some of the explanations given by Iran. And they also said in the report that there were certain things which Iran didn't even respond at all. And on top of that, there were then some events on ground, like found some uranium particles, which someone could have very well asked, according to the IAEA procedures, hey, let's find where this came to this place in Parchin. Let's go to take a resampling and see what this means. So all those were brushed away because people wanted to implement the JCPOA with the hope that that will work and Iran will perhaps change its behavior, which then didn't take place, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, indeed. With this, of course, in context, people tend to forget those matters, and I still remember there were extensive discussions about this during the Obama administration, and it was dismissed time and again with no actual response. We also here at TV7 sent a request for a response on this matter specifically and never got one. But nonetheless, the narrative plays out according to the way that it is being disseminated in global media, and ultimately the Trump administration was blamed for this. But Dr. Heinonen, let's go deeper into the current state of play. Following the 12-day war, of course, much of Iran's nuclear program, non-civilian program, if I may be more explicit, has been destroyed. And ultimately, we're dealing now with a reality in which the IAEA is seeking to receive access, to gain access into those installations to be able to fulfill its mandate, and that is to scrutinize Iran's nuclear infrastructure and also help it avoid a calamity. What can you tell us about that?
Well, actually, where we are now is an unfortunate situation because we see a lot of satellite imagery. We see that there is obviously quite a damage in Natanz, Isfahan, or Fordow. But what about the rest? Because the program was much wider. There are stocks of centrifuges somewhere. We also learned, as Mr. Arachi said, that they were looking to build an additional small enrichment plant somewhere, perhaps in Isfahan area. These are all unknowns. What is the real status? Where is 400 kilograms of uranium? And one should know 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, 180 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium. And one should not forget 20% enriched uranium. It's very high enrichment if you look at going to higher enrichments. And these quantities are big. They are not very unusual. I give just a ballpark figure. 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. There is no known reactor under construction or planned in Iran to that. If you look this 400 kilograms, you can make maybe fuel for several tens of reactors which are of the size of the Tehran research reactor. So it's a huge amount of material for civilian purpose. And this is why Mr. Grossi has asked that what is the civilian purpose of this material? Or is it really just for blackmailing, like some people say, that you are so close to the high enriched uranium and you can increase the stakes and produce 90% enriched uranium very quickly? So these are the things which are unknowns. And before the IAEA gets to the sites, get the declarations which Iran is obliged to provide under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, so it's now in breach of those obligations. So it has not submitted numbers, not about the status of the locations, and not the design information for any new location which they might have been. So there are a lot of open questions with uncertainties. And the most important uncertainties for risk assessments are always unknown unknowns. Is there something which we don't know that it exists?
Is this a breach of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or both?
Yeah, it's a breach on the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, which is concluded under the NPT regime. So it's a safeguards obligation which is broken. And this is also for IAEA a very difficult thing, because IAEA is actually obliged to verify, but it cannot verify because it doesn't have the access. So IAEA is not able to fulfill its most important mandate when it comes to the implementation of safeguards.
Terrible. Well, Mr. Olin, I'd like to gain your insight on this, since naturally, Ambassador Grossi, as you mentioned, the general director of the IAEA, is a shrewd diplomat with much experience accumulated. He utilized a meeting between the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the Egyptian top diplomat Abdelati, while visiting, of course, in Cairo. He traveled there, met with the Iranian top diplomat, and discussed a few matters. It seems the Iranians are quite, they continue to drag their feet, if we put it mildly. What can be done in order to recalibrate the situation?
So put aside, if you will, the Egyptian angle, because the Egyptians are powerless to mediate in this arena, and they have been historically the most anti-Israeli in the international fora regarding the Middle East weapons of mass destruction free zone. Even after President Sadat went to Jerusalem and peace was signed, nevertheless, they cannot tolerate what they claim is Israel's nuclear monopoly in the region. And because they are too poor to have nuclear weapons of their own, they want Israel to get rid of what they claim are Israel's. So the Egyptians and the Iranians are actually on the same page on that, and it is not important that the meeting between Grossi and Araghchi happened to have taken place in Cairo. Now, on the issue in general, the best analogy is the uranium enrichment, because the Iranians want to enrich their power as a nation, as a regional force. They want to go up from 60% to 90% as a regional power. And for that, they need, of course, the acquiescence not only of the United States, assuming that they do have the Chinese and the Russians on their side. They need Turkey, they need Saudi Arabia, and they need the IAEA. It will be very interesting to see, as Dr. Heinonen mentioned, when the General Conference convenes, what the Israeli position will be, because retired Brigadier General Moshe Edrei will represent Israel, and this is the annual occasion to find out from his statement the Israeli position. So obviously he will call on Iran to cease and desist, but he will also say something about Israel's own position.
Well, we shouldn't forget, of course, that on the 28th of August, the E3, namely Britain, France, and Germany, did pass in accordance with UN Security Council Resolution 2231, the snapback mechanism, which essentially triggered the countdown of 30 days for the triggering of a whole list of sanctions that were enacted between 2006 all the way to 2010. One of those sanctions, which I went through all of them, does highlight particularly Resolution 1696 of 2006, that Iran, it basically demands of Iran to suspend uranium enrichment and reprocessing activities, introducing initial measures to address noncompliance. In addition to this, Resolution 1737, also in 2006, imposed sanctions on Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles program, and conducted a number of asset freezes for individuals related to this programs and entities involved in Iran's nuclear activities. And all in all, also the 2010, I think, resolution of 1929, which was a very vigorous and the most potent of the various resolutions imposed on the Iranians, included full arms embargo, restrictions on the ballistic missiles activities altogether, and measures targeting Iran's financial sector and shipping. Now, Dr. Heinonen, naturally, this cannot be stopped by the Iranians, but Russia, China, and Iran will likely dispute this matter. Run us through what such a dispute could cause and what would ultimately be a reaction in this context.
Certainly, this is pretty much a political decision rather than technical. Let's start with that. And China and Russia are providing helping hand to Iran in handling this situation. And they sent a letter on the 2nd of September to the UN Secretary General, to the President of General Assembly, and then also distributed this letter to the IAEA member states, where these three countries, Iran, China, and Russia, disputed the legal basis for snapback in this case, saying that actually E3 has also violated the agreement, while the E3 has entirely different take, and they think that yes, we can snap it back. So there will be a showdown in the UN Security Council, most likely, unless some other arrangements are being negotiated. And I think that this is what Iran is now doing. I have seen Mr. Arachi saying, I have seen some other earlier negotiators telling that we want to negotiate a win-win deal here where everyone wins. And that's very, very dangerous, because in reality, you go back to the same equation which we have now had with the JCPOA, that there's no real milestone when Iran needs to be in fully compliance and provide answers to the IAEA and access to the IAEA. So something different is gone. And as Amir said just a few minutes ago, there will be showdown, I'm sure, in the IAEA General Conference next week, but most likely around 28th of September, there will be a big debate in the UN Security Council, and most likely also in the General Assembly, about next steps to be taken. So at this stage, in my past experience, I don't see much prospect for the unity. So we may end up with the situation where some states follow the UN Security Council resolution, impose sanctions to Iran and the trading partners. And then it comes to the US and others, that are they able to impose good secondary sanctions to bring Iran to answer to these questions. So this is going to be very turbulent 2 weeks ahead.
I think it's very important, just for the sake of our viewers, to shed some light on those secondary sanctions. How does that actually operate within the context of deterring Russia and China not to fulfill their obligations under the various Security Council resolutions that would be reenacted once the snapback mechanism comes into effect on September 27th?
I think that this is shown, I think, to a certain degree in the case of North Korea that US has, for example, imposed some sanctions to Russian companies and banks which are bypassing the UN Security Council resolution sanctions on North Korea. So this is the only way to do it. But it needs a heavy lifting because you have to go to all 180 member states of the United Nations and do the heavy lifting in capital to convince them that it's in the interest of international peace and security that this problem gets solved. And sanctions is one of them.
Thank you, Dr. Heinonen. Mr. Owen, go ahead.
When Israel was on the receiving end of such sanctions, what was called the Arab boycott, the Arab countries also had a secondary boycott on those nations or companies which bypassed the boycott on Israel. This was a secondary and even tertiary boycott because there are always ways to bypass it through false flag companies. The real question is political will to tackle those who breach the boycott or the sanctions. And we see what is happening now between the United States and India. When India goes its own way regarding its sales of oil to Russia or to China. And it's not a pretty sight to see allies or former allies fighting over secondary sanctions.
Well, I think the United States and India, rest assuredly, are still allies, and this relationship is vital. And I will emphasize this. It's vital that Washington and New Delhi will maintain strong relations within the composition of strategic power competition, particularly at a day when we do see China and Russia breaching all international arrangements and agreements, including what we're just speaking about. I mean, what impact, Mr. Owen, would there be on the rules-based order were China and Russia to just float the fact that they're not willing to abide by a UN Security Council resolution in light of the fact that they did ultimately formulate this arrangement in the first place?
The rules-based order will disintegrate. The United States will isolate itself from most of the world. It will go into its shell, into the Western Hemisphere. Europe will go its separate way, perhaps be under Russian domination. And China will dominate Asia. It's a terrifying spectacle.
Indeed. Well, I'm less pessimistic as you when it comes to the relationship between the United States and Europe in particular, since the one needs the other in all contexts. But nonetheless, European countries need to fix their domestic problems, which are accumulating, and we do see that firsthand. We're drawing near to the end of the program, and we would like to have some insight on where are we moving from here. Maybe some optimism from you, Dr. Heinonen?
Yes, a tiny small twinkle, because what is also in the question is the credibility of the non-proliferation system. And China and Russia had been key players on that. And if you look today, like production of this high-enriched uranium by Iran, all the other countries which have a civilian enrichment program, Argentina, Brazil, Japan, Netherlands, Germany, they don't produce anything more than 20% enriched uranium. Most even only just below 5% enriched. So they have a reason perhaps to convince Iran not to go too far. And at the same time, there are tools which hit, for example, with the secondary sanctions with Russia. Russia has tremendous nuclear industry, export industry. People talk about exporting gas to Europe. This is peanuts if you look how much money Russian economy draws from nuclear power plant construction in Egypt, in Turkey, in Bangladesh, in China, and how it exports still today. For example, enriched uranium to the United States of America. So there is a leverage, but it leverage has price, because if you go to buy uranium somewhere else, the price goes up and it might be difficult to get. So this is where these major states now have a problem, and they have to do hard decisions.
Mr. Olli, the last minute is yours.
The Iranians, under the supreme leader, insist that enriching uranium on their soil, this is the operative term, is a matter of national prestige, which they cannot give up. So this is setting up the negotiations so that either a formula will be found to keep enriching uranium on their soil, but under some supervision, international or multinational, or finally, they will give that concession in return for something. So I agree with Dr. Heinonen. It is not necessarily going to end with a bang.
Well, time will tell, of course, but we will continue to monitor nonetheless. I'd like to immediately thank Dr. Olli Heinonen and Mr. Emil Olin for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.